Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast presented by Ingles. We are continuing our summer guest series, and this guy was really great. I'm super excited for our listeners to hear this interview. Mac, we have Father's Day coming up. It is Father's Day Eve, or the week of Father's Day, and I know you're excited. And so, of course, Ingles has everything you could need for Father's Day. Not for you, Matt, because you don't need to go there and shop for yourself. Now, you can go get some meat, if you want to grill on Father's Day. I'm sure that would bring you such joy. But it has what Khaki needs to go make sure your Father's Day is perfect.
That's right. Well, fathers are kind of like the offensive line of the world, KG. You just the unsung heroes, if you will. And so on Father's Day, we grill out. We grill our own food. And where else are you going to go but the official supermarket of the Gramlich and McLean podcast? That's Ingles. Go get your meats from there, guys. And sons, nephews, whatever it takes. Go get your dads some meat. Cook it up for them. Go to Ingles. Get it done. That's what we'll be doing. I can't wait. I'm super excited. But today's guest, KG, David Pasch, he is just one of my favorites. As I'm about to die on my own saliva here. He's one of my favorites. Love watching him on a plethora of platforms. You got NBA, college football, college basketball. He truly does it all, and he serves as the play-by-play commentator. The stories, KG, are some of the best.
He has called games for pretty much every major network in the NBA, NFL, college football. He does it all, and he's a proud Syracuse grad. He actually was the voice of Syracuse football and basketball for a while at the beginning of his career. He's got some great stories for us, some Bill Walton stories. So let's get to a message from Ingles, and then let's get to Dave Pasch.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
Dave, welcome into the podcast, man. I do want to peel back the curtain just a little bit here because I feel like our listeners need to know this because it speaks to how great of a man and great guy that you are. I sent you a message. I said, hey, buddy, would love to have you come on the podcast. Thinking, 2-3 weeks from now, we get you on. He said, hey, I've got plans. I'm leaving the country. You got me tonight or it'll have to be a month. And we did it, man. And you're here. Welcome to the show. I really appreciate you, brother.
You got it. Well, in full disclosure, since we're going down that road, I'm taking my 75-year-old mother to Italy for a week. So we're flying in from different parts of the country to meet up. So I was flying into New York a night early to make sure that, she has no issues tomorrow morning getting here. And obviously with me, with the time change, it just worked out better to get in the night before. So it actually worked out great. I got nothing to do. I'm all yours for as long as you need me.
Well,
great man,
and this works.
Son.
Yeah, Dave, this works great for us, honestly, because Mac has an 8-month-old and she's asleep. And I have a 1-month-old and he's currently on a walk with his dad. So this is perfect.
Primo time.
Because his
congratulations to you both.
Yeah, so this is great.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
We appreciate it.
It's fun.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I didn't realize you guys had kids that young, especially you, Kelly. I didn't realize a month old. That's amazing.
She's killing
it. Congrats to you both.
She's killing it, man. It's been cool. It's been a lot of fun to see, and we'll continue to see Kelly's little boy grow. He's right behind her, so it'll be fun to see her.
Mac's daughter is the elder stateswoman.
That's right.
Now.
That's right.
She's been around for a little bit,
figuring it all out. Well, Dave, let's jump into it. Go ahead.
I was just saying, mine just turned 25. My oldest turned 25 today. So you guys got a ways to go to catch up with us. But
does it fly by, man, as quickly as people say?
Of course it does. Yeah, I mean, 25 years seems like yesterday.
Right.
So yeah, it's crazy. We still have one. We have 3. So she's our oldest. We have one who just graduated from college, and then our son has a year left of high school. So we're. I just turned 50 and we're a year away from being empty nesters. So we'll at least be young empty nesters.
Sure.
Young at heart. My wife looks younger than I do. But I like to say young at heart for me. She looks young. I'm young at heart.
There you go. That's all that matters. That's all that matters. Well, again, man, really appreciate your time. Excited to jump all into it with you today. I mean, you do it all, brother. NFL, college football, college basketball, NBA, and everything in between. You just got done with some NBA playoffs. I think this is a little bit of a time off for you. So is this normally when you can recharge, take a little vacation?
That's it, exactly. I just finished up. I did radio for the Eastern Conference Finals, ESPN radio. I'd done it about 10 years ago, but it had been a long time, so it's kind of nice to get back into basketball and radio consistently. I'd done Westwood One the last few years for NCAA tournament, but doing a conference finals, and obviously that series was insane. And then prior to that, handful of games on ESPN TV for the playoffs. So, but to answer your question, yes, I'm until training camp and really preseason, I don't really get busy in terms of work life, and obviously things will get really busy in September. But between now and then, it's a little bit of a light lift or no lifting,
Sure.
with the exception of some pasta and pizza and maybe a glass of wine.
That's right. Good old hand to mouth. You love to see that workout final. Speaking of finals, there, who's winning the NBA finals? This will come out. It probably won't be over, but tell me who's winning it.
Well, I would have thought Denver in 5 or 6. I'm not sure now. I still think Denver wins it, but I think it's probably going to go a little longer. I've learned a long time ago not to count out Eric Spoelstra. I think he's a terrific coach. The makeup of that team is, they did have the best record in the East last year, so it's a little deceiving when we talk about them as an 8 seed. They had injuries. And, they probably had as many injuries as anybody in the NBA at bad times. But it doesn't seem to matter. They lose Tyler Hero in the first game of the playoffs, and they end up beating Milwaukee in 5. No 8 seed had ever won a first-round series in fewer than 6. And then obviously beat the Knicks and then beat Boston in 7 after blowing a 3-0 lead. So really shouldn't be surprised at what they're doing. And Jimmy Butler is the perfect guy that fits what I know annoys people when they hear it, but heat culture. He really fits that. And when he is the guy that is at the front of the line for that, and he's all in, the other guys can't help but being all in as well. And it's not surprising they won game 2, and we're recording this after game 2. But I still think Denver they're different than Boston in the sense that they're a lot mentally tougher. They're a lot like Miami in that regard. They're a mentally tough team. That's why I don't think that they're going to get derailed by the home loss in game 2, as surprising as it was to a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see if you're right, Dave, as we release this in a few weeks. And I'm intrigued by this series overall. But you are one of those unique guys where there are very few people that call NBA and NFL. And then you add in college football, college basketball. Of course, we're going to, as I'm sure everyone asks you about Bill Walton, we will at the end. Eye roll, I know. But how do you do that? How do you keep all of that straight when you're just bouncing around from all these different leagues?
I guess I'm used to it, Kelly. I don't know that there's really any secret sauce to it. I've watched and had a lot of mentors over the years that do a lot of the same stuff. Mike Tirico, Sean McDonough, Ian Eagle, 3 guys who were 3 mentors of mine growing up in the business. And, all those guys have been very good at various sports, bouncing around from one to the other, and doing it at a very high level. And I think when, you have those kind of guys to look up to, and it's just play by play. Now it is different sports and, different leagues, but it's not like you're going from, medical engineering to, computer science from one day to the next. I mean, we're still just calling a sport, but it is different, and radio and TV is different, and pro sports is much easier than college sports, much easier, because everybody, the faces, the numbers, all about the teams. I've always felt college football is the hardest, the most challenging. It can be the most rewarding too, because you may see a team you may see them at the beginning of the year and never see them again. And so a lot of times you're studying. If you get a team week 10 and you haven't had them all year, you're basically studying 9 weeks of material to get ready for that game, again, for a group that you may not see again the rest of the year. That's one of the great things about college football too. But going back to your question, I think just the biggest thing is trying to take care of yourself and make sure that you can do it all. As I'm getting a little bit older, it's harder, to be honest, with the travel. That's the hardest part. Everything else is fun, but it's the early wake-up calls to get from one city to the next and being nervous about whether the flight's going to go and what happens if the flight's late, what happens if you don't get there. I do know that if I were to miss a college basketball game, or at least be a little bit late, I think Bill Walton on play-by-play would be entertaining. I don't think people would miss me that much.
Yeah, that would be must-watch TV in itself. He could just pretend to be you and just throw it back and forth to himself. I'm sure he'd be fine with that. I agree with you on that, though. The least glamorous part, and honestly the most challenging part, is the travel at times, especially when you get into basketball and weather and all that stuff.
Wait,
But
you guys don't have a private jet? What? That's just me.
yeah, it's just Mac. It's just Mac. That's how he goes up to Bristol and back. So we talk about you doing all these different things. Growing up, did you want to be a play-by-play guy? Is that something you dreamed of? I know you are a Syracuse guy, as is, all the good ones. And obviously you're a ACC guy, as a Syracuse guy. I know you weren't when you were there. Well, they weren't in the ACC, but is this something you always wanted to do from a play-by-play perspective?
It's not. It isn't. But very early, I realized that it was something I really loved. And so at first, I wanted to either be an actor or stand-up comedian, but I was terrible. I had a friend who had worked at a comedy club in Madison, Wisconsin, where I grew up. And I used to go with him. He was actually paid to work there. I would go like an open mic night, and I was awful, and realized that I wasn't very good at it. And so I thought, because I was a decent athlete, but not a great athlete, I wasn't going to be good enough to play in college. I played golf in high school and basketball in high school, but I wasn't going to be good enough. And I really wanted to stay involved. And I was such a huge sports fan. And I remember just watching Dick Vitale. I was a big college basketball fan growing up in Wisconsin, and Syracuse was great at the time. Sherman Douglas, Derek Coleman, they were always on ESPN, and they were like an NBA team. They were like the Showtime Lakers, and Dick Vitale was calling the games and always talking about all these guys that went to Syracuse, and he's naming, guys like Dick Stockton and Marv Albert and Bob Costas. And I'm like, I know those guys. Those are the guys I watch and love calling the games. So I thought, I can go to school and be a color commentator like Dick Vitale, but then realized kind of as when I got there that it was more about, the play-by-play. And I remember sitting in an auditorium at Syracuse when I went on my visit, and they asked everybody who wanted to call a Syracuse basketball game to raise their hand. And literally everybody in the auditorium put their hand up. There probably was 200 people. It felt like 20,000, just because, it's relatively small town, and everybody's hands up. And I'm like, this isn't the place for me. I got no chance. But things worked out where I started at the student radio station pretty early on, and I was hooked. I was hooked on play-by-play, was hooked on being at the games, and loved it. And that's all I wanted to do.
That's amazing.
Wow.
That is absolutely amazing. And it's so fun to kind of just hear those and how it happens, and just being hooked there. Going to one of the best schools in the country to do it, having all those giants that you mentioned, that you just, were a part of, and saw those guys, kind of as they blew up there. Let's look at the football side for a second, as there's many sides to Dave Pasch here. When you call, the college game and then you prepare for the NFL, do either of those kind of help you get in rhythm? You go Saturday, you do your thing, and then you go do the NFL side. How does that, I guess, relationship work in the fall?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'm always waiting on Sundays for that schedule. We don't get our schedule for the Saturday until 6 days before. So I'm like dying waiting for the schedule, because obviously I know where the Cardinals are going to be. And so it's all about, okay, the travel gymnastics. First of all, are we going to be at noon? Are we going to be at 3:30? Are we going to be in prime? Are we going to be late? if the Cardinals are East, okay, I can pretty much bet we're not going to do the 10:30 game. If they're in Green Bay, maybe it's a little bit harder. So I have a sense maybe of a handful of options in my head, but obviously don't know until the schedule comes out. So it's a game that I end up playing and probably driving all the people I work with crazy trying to think about. But yeah, once the schedule is out and we know where we're going and make travel, it's all about, and for me, like I mentioned earlier, pro sports is much easier, especially the Cardinals, because you're doing the same team every week. And, the opposing team doesn't take a ton of time to prepare for. The hardest thing is sometimes where they put you, the broadcast locations for these games. I need a telescope for some of these NFL stadiums now where they have us to call the game. But at least you don't have elements to worry about. You don't have like these long production meetings. You call the game. That's the beauty of radio. You don't have time to get into storylines. So it's a much easier lift in terms of preparation. As I mentioned to you guys earlier, college football is like, again, it's like you prepare for a whole season each week.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But the game itself, and I mean, I love the atmosphere, the pageantry, obviously. The game, every game feels huge in college football. Every game is such a big event. And so I love getting there and getting there early and being around campus and going out to dinner and just kind of watching as the intensity grows, around the venue, and meeting with the coaches. That all is fun, and just being with your group and the people you're calling the game with too, and that chemistry you build with them off the air goes a long way to what you sound like on the air.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any question about that, and very evident, in your broadcasts and the folks that you work with. I do want to ask you about the state of college football, but first wanted to see if there was any travel nightmare stories. Like, is there one
Oh man,
that just off the top of your head you're like, wow, this is brutal. This is brutal.
I mean, I don't want to bore people, but yeah, there were two close calls. There was one. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I was working with Greg McElroy and Tom Luganville. We were at a 3:30 game at Ohio State, and the Cardinals were playing the Panthers next day. And it was like a 6-hour drive from Columbus to Charlotte. And I'm like, you know what? The game's going to end at 7:30. I don't want to be driving 6-7 hours. Got to get out of the horseshoe. Like, do I really want to do that? I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'll fly the next morning. And but there wasn't a nonstop out of Columbus, so I had to drive to Dayton. So I drive to Dayton to get the nonstop the next morning. Well, of course, the nonstop is delayed. And eventually, I'm stressing out the whole time. I think we landed at 11. The game is at 1. We landed at 11. Now, there was a nonstop from Columbus, but it left later. That's why I didn't take it. So I landed at 11. I'm on the phone with the Cardinals. They're kind enough to send a police escort to come get me.
Wow.
So what's funny is I come racing out of the Charlotte airport, and I hear my name called, and I look over, and it's Lugs. It's Tom. He had already landed, and he sees this unmarked police car come in with its lights on, and me running into it, like waving as I jump into the car. So Anyway, thankfully, because of the police escort, it got me there quickly. But that was scary. That was nervous, and then nerve-wracking. And then there was one a couple of years ago where we game at Nebraska at Wisconsin. Same thing, 3:30 ABC. Couldn't get to Seattle that night, so I had to drive to Chicago, fly the next morning, drive to Chicago. The flight the next morning is delayed. And the reason it was delayed is because one of the overhead bins would not close. They delayed the flight for like 4 hours and eventually just took the bin out. And again, for people like delays stink, but like when you're stressing out, it's two different employers.
Sure.
Right. So you're trying to get, you want to make sure everybody's happy and pleasing both your bosses, and you're sitting there looking at the clock. And I think that one for 1 o'clock, we landed at 11:30. Still made it to the game, but that was not fun.
Gosh, that's brutal. That's brutal. Luckily enough, man, I don't have those 2 jobs in the fall. I haven't had too many close calls like that. So I can only imagine how terrifying that is. Okay, college football, the state of it. Things are Going crazy. Things are changing. NIL, transfer portal, playoff expansion, realignment with conferences, all these different things that are just very new, to all of us, in the last, 4 or 5 years here. What do you think about it? Is it good for college football? Do you personally like it, hate it? What do you kind of feel about where we're going as a sport here?
I think what's interesting is maybe when it first started, it felt like there would be more parity in college football. And I do think that certainly there are teams that are, we did the American Championship last year, so got a chance to see Tulane. And a school like that can turn things around quickly with good players and good coaches. Obviously, they don't have the NIL dollars that other schools have. And you still see schools like that, Coastal Carolinas, those kind of programs that can have good seasons. But I think ultimately what's happening is making the rich richer. And look at the blue chip programs. Now, it's June, but just taking a guess at what the top 15 is going to look like, think how many blue chip programs are in there. Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, LSU, and USC. I mean, these are all programs that are used to being at the top. And it just seems like because of that, they have the dollars for NIL. They're going to attract the best players in the portal because the portal is about players getting NIL money and getting to the NFL. So I think ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to enhance the major programs. I still think that the smaller schools will benefit because, an expanded playoff, they're not going to be considered contenders for the championship anyway. Now, what happens to the Syracuses of the world, the schools that are in a power conference that may not have the NIL dollars or have trouble attracting guys in the portal? Are they going to stay around 500? Probably. Is it going to be harder for them to have an 11-win season unless they can really build things up with recruits or catch a break and get a great quarterback through the portal? Man, I don't know. It just feels like which I don't know that it's a bad thing. It's just we're used to seeing the best programs year in, year out winning college football that we've seen for the last 30, 40 years. I mean, Florida State, there's another one, right? Clemson, I mean, Miami, the same programs we've talked about forever, even some that have had ups and downs. It just feels like they are all benefiting from this in a big way.
Mm-hmm. And in some ways, that's kind of how college football's always been. You've always had the haves and the have-nots to a certain extent. I do think the portal helps some of these programs. You mentioned a team like a Syracuse, TCU, for example, being able to use the portal and also just hire really good coaching staff, offensive coordinator, things like that. I joke obviously about you being an ACC guy because of the Syracuse stuff, but we're of course an ACC podcast, and then you also live on the West Coast, so you see what's going on with the Pac-12. You call a lot of games in the Conference of Champions on the basketball side. Where do you think those two stand? Kind of the coastal conferences, if you will, in this new super conference era.
On the ACC, the Pac-12 is obviously a big unknown at this point, depending on the TV deal. It's all about the TV deal, because if the presidents don't like what George Kliavkoff is presenting to them, and the Big 12 is now locked in with ESPN, the ACC is locked in with ESPN, it's got to be a nervous time for a lot of those ADs and coaches and chancellors. So the Pac-12, I don't know what's going to happen. I hope they stay together. Obviously, the USC and UCLA departures are incredibly debilitating. And I still think the Pac-12 can recover. People I've talked to, it feels like, I know there's some people in the league and around the league that feels like maybe some of the other conferences are planting information through the media to potentially sway some of these schools to make a rash decision before the TV stuff comes out and try to pry them away. Because a lot of people I've taught you, still think the money is going to be there. It's not going to be what it might have been, and it may not be what the Big 12 got, but it's not going to be as bad as some people think. These are some of the Pac-12 experts I've talked to, people that associated or in the conference. So I'm curious to see how it plays out. I still think there's a really good chance they all stick together. The ACC is interesting because I have to think the SEC wants Clemson and Florida State for football. So, what does that mean if one of those schools goes, or both? Miami. What happens to the ACC basketball conference? Is incredibly strong. I still think the ACC football is in a good spot. You've seen programs like North Carolina and Wake have success the last few years and obviously attract really good quarterbacks. I know North Carolina's end of the season last year was disappointing, but you still got a great player there, and you've got Mac Brown and his staff that are attracting good players. NC State, and watching what they've been able to do. The ACC is still a strong league. How much does the SEC, is the SEC content where it is, or how much money is it interested in throwing at some of these power programs in the ACC for football?
Yeah. No, I agree, man. It's
great point.
It's interesting because all those things that you're, mentioning and reasons that you're mentioning, it's like a Cold War right now. It really is. It feels like everybody is just kind of waiting for something, and then it's okay, boom, let's go. Let's either add, get rid of, whatever it's going to be. And it's fascinating. I know I kind of asked it to you. I'm going to repurpose it here. Is that good for college football? Is two super conferences where maybe you have 45, 50 teams and a new division, whatever, is that good? Is that cool? Do you like that?
It's good in the sense that if that's where it ends up, and boy, it certainly feels like we're headed that way. SEC versus Big Ten, it feels like we're heading that way, and I'm not sure how long it will take to get there. But if that's where we go, it's good in the sense that there's a lot of money coming in, and that the playoff is expanding. More money means more opportunity for players, more opportunities for coaches, more opportunities for fans to see their teams. I think just the expansion of the playoff says the college football is in a good spot. For the people that are against the college football playoff expansion, it boggles my mind, because it only enhances the regular season. I just think it makes more regular season games more important. You can lose your first two games in the current setup, and there's less interest in a nationally televised game for a team that's 0-2 because it's all about the playoff. But now you could still win your league.
Exactly.
You could still go 9-3 and find a win as an at-large, depending on who you played in the first two games of the year. So I think all of this is good for college football in the sense that it's increased exposure, there's more money coming into it, and that's better for the fan.
Sure. Yeah, man, I love it. I'm excited. I do think that's where we're trending. It'll be interesting to just see, though, how many players, how many conferences are involved. What does it look like? Is it a new, like I said, kind of division where the big boys say, this is what we're doing, we're moving on? And is it just football? Is it just men's and women's basketball, and everything else maybe operates the same? It's going to be fascinating to see. Something else that's fascinating is your basketball play-by-play work, and working with a guy like Bill Walton. It's must-watch TV. I never know what's going to happen, what to expect. So just if you could peel back the curtain for us on that relationship and how it all works. How do you approach that versus anything else that you do on TV?
It's obviously incredibly different. I've had a lot of people that played with Bill or know Bill very well, but in particular guys that played with Bill that will tell me that he views it as if he is playing in a game. And I watch him, and he prepares as if he's playing in a game. Like before the game, he's stretching, he's eating energy chews and protein bars. He is getting ready to play Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And off the air, before the game, he doesn't like to talk to me, wants to be spontaneous. After the game, I'm his teammate. But on the air, I think in his mind, I'm Kareem. I'm like his adversary, and he's playing in a game, and I am the impediment to him winning the game. And it's an amazing. He's very, idiosyncratic, I think is probably the best way to describe him. He
I'll look
just
that up
there's
later.
certain
I'll look
things
that
about
word
him
up
that
later. Don't
are
worry.
yeah. And I went to Syracuse. I shouldn't know the meaning of that word, but I actually do. Um, they're just I've never seen anybody like him or been around anybody like him. We first started working together in 2006, my first year on the NBA, which he claims, by the way, never happened. He still doesn't acknowledge that we actually worked together on some NBA games almost 20 years ago. But when ESPN got the Pac-12 contract, they wanted to put the two of us together. And, I think at first he tried to, push my buttons to see how I'd react. And I've, talked to other guys that he's worked with that did not react the way I did. They no longer work together. In fact, Bill, I can't say the name, but Bill told me a story one time. I asked him if he, still kept in touch with a certain play-by-play guy that he used to work with. And he goes, "Oh, he hated me and probably still does." So, working with Bill's not for everybody, but I enjoy it. It's a challenge. It's fun. It's unique. It's, again, he hasn't played basketball in 35 years. He was one of the best players of all time, the 30 for 30 that as the time that this is out will have been released 4 episodes. I've seen all 4 episodes. I just did a panel a couple months ago with Danny Ainge, Mickey Hart, who's the drummer for the Grateful Dead, and Lemmy Wilkins, that followed on ESPN Plus the 4-part documentary on Bill, and it was a fascinating watch. He's such an interesting guy, and he loves to share all of his knowledge with the world on television.
Man, that I can't wait for that 30 for 30, by the way. I've been seeing the commercials. I'm locked into that. There's so many ways I could go with this, but my favorite Bill Walton moment ever that I witnessed on television is when he ate the cupcake with the lit candle on it. And I need to know, is that in your mind the craziest thing he's done, or have you seen something crazier?
I mean, it's up there. I mean, anybody that, he did it again. So he did it, on live TV. And then we had Bobby Hurley because they just upset. I think they were playing Oregon. They upset Oregon. And so we had Bobby on. And like, not every Pac-12 coach is a fan of Bill.
Sure.
But the ones that are love Bill. Bobby Hurley might be Bill's biggest fan. And I think part of that is because Bobby was such a great player. He appreciates Bill. And I think they all appreciate Bill, but a lot of them look at Bill from a coaching perspective, like, okay, I'm trying to recruit, and this guy's on TV talking about, the ozone layer, not talking about basketball. Some coaches don't like that. A lot of those guys are no longer there. He's had his run-ins with previous UCLA coaches, but so anyway, we told Bobby about it. Bobby wanted to see it again, so Bill did the lit cupcake during the post-game interview for Bobby, and Bobby just stared at him and just dying laughing. There's a lot of them. He went to the bathroom during the Pac-12 tournament when a game went to overtime a couple years ago. When he just got up, and when you got to go, you got to go. And he doesn't move well, as you know, he can't run. So, like, I started the first 2 minutes of the overtime, I was calling by myself, and all the money guys in the front row in Vegas are turning around, looking at me like, "What's going on?" I'm like, I don't know. He didn't say anything. He didn't think the game was over. So of course we have a camera now on the tunnel, right, where the restroom was. So as soon as Bill comes out, the restroom. So it's like a split screen of the game and the shooting Bill coming out of the bathroom and him walking on the floor, almost hitting an official as he comes back to sit down. It's Bill's world, and we're just all kind of living in it.
That's right. That's right. It is. You never know. You literally have no clue what's going to happen.
Does Bill truly believe the Pac-12 is the conference of champions? Like, is he that committed to the Pac-12?
It's a good question. I don't know. With UCLA leaving, I don't know.
Phone him in.
Phone
him
for a while.
That's right.
He wouldn't talk to anybody for a while. He's not real thrilled about the as he would call it, joining a truck stop conference. So,
Oh,
because that's one of, obviously his favorite things is Pac-12, Conference of
Yeah.
Champions, no truck stops here. Which is not true, by the way. If you've been to some of the Pac-12 schools, there are plenty
Coleman.
of truck stops. But yeah, I don't know if he believes it or if he just, I mean, in a way, it's true, right? They still have the most championships, so
True.
I get it.
it's just facts. It's just facts. Dave, man, this was so much fun. I can't thank you enough for making this happen. I'm excited for your vacation. I hope you live it up. As you said, wine, pasta, maybe some
Pizza.
pizza. That's it. That's the workout regimen. Okay, right here, right here.
Oh yeah. Well, the good thing is you walk enough where you can walk it all off. We're kind of used
That's
to
right.
it, so you can
That's
kind
right.
of walk it all off. But yeah, it's kind of nice to when I travel in the U.S., it's for work. So for me to vacation in the United
Mm.
States feels like work. So to be able to get out and totally be off the grid will be wonderful. Thanks for having me on, though, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to our guy, Dave Pasch, for joining us as he gets ready to go to Italy. Mac, as this is released, I hope he is enjoying some time in Italy because that's pretty darn cool.
That's right.
He told some funny travel stories, and not funny at the time, but funny later. I was going to add this in, but I figured I'll wait till the outro. My craziest one is I was trying to fly back to get back to do the radio show that I used to do. So I was on a real time crunch. And we were in Hartford trying to go to DC and then to Greenville. And we couldn't leave because the toilet water on the plane was frozen.
I remember the story.
Oh, man. You knew it was cold outside when
It's
that happened.
awful. It's awful. I mean, the craziest things that can delay a plane. It's unbelievable.
Everything.
But big shout out to Dave making time for us. I told it on the front end of the interview there, but kind of just sent him a message thinking we would record this, in a week or so, maybe 2 weeks. And he said, "Hey, bud, I'm going to Italy for like a month. So you either got tonight or in a month." And I said, "Let's do it. Let's do it tonight." So very grateful for his time. He literally had just stepped off a plane in New York City, made it happen for us, and the stories. Just unbelievable. So fun to hear about kind of how he got into the business, that he really didn't want to, but then kind of fell in love with it and got it going. And of course, the Bill Walton. Go check out that 30 for 30. I believe it just came out. Maybe last week sometime, but you got to check it out. All the stories. I've seen so many snippets and samples of his interaction with Dave, and of course, just watching throughout the years. It's funny, and he's a funny guy. But that's it from us, guys. Another great episode presented by our great friends over at Ingles. Really appreciate them. And of course, thank you to David Pasch joining us. We need you to go over to YouTube, rate, review, subscribe right here. Join us. It's a lot of fun. You got to see all the action. But of course, the OGs over on Apple Podcast, rate, review, subscribe over there as well. We would greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.